My name is Spiritchild from the South Bronx, living in Brooklyn, New York.
Here visiting in Prague.
Yes, that's right.
My first question is about your childhood, about the conditions you were growing up in.
Wow, that's a good question. You didn't prep me for this. That's great. So I grew up 1978. During this time, the 80s, Reaganomics, crack epidemic. I was a part of that. I grew up in the South Bronx. Family were victims of this crack epidemic, so it was very close to me. A lot of people in my family were incarcerated. But also the beautiful thing is that in high school and elementary school, I started writing and expressing myself through this form. And I found a bunch of other friends who were doing the same thing, so it was good to team up with them, and that's kind of summary of my childhood. If that's enough, I don't know.
Yeah, that's enough, because what I'm interested is the point when you realize that you have the voice and you can be the singer of the freedom, like the transition when that happened. And
that came much later. I think mostly in high school. I had a really cool history teacher, and we started talking about Black history. I took his course. It was an elective, and I started learning. My first political action was to no longer use the N-word.
Right.
And he told us, if you're going to use the N-word, you have to put money in the jar. And his way of doing this was very influential to me. And I started asking him questions. He was sort of my mentor, so my writing changed in high school. And I started doing more political things as opposed to just rapping about partying and things that I don't have, which I used to do that as well.
Right.
But, yeah, because of him, I started writing and changing things.
And when did you come up with the idea with the movement in the motion?
Oh, that was also much later. That was 2003, around this time, during the height of the invasion of Iraq, second time around. I started noticing in communities that there was apathy and a disconnect from the anti-war movement and the people who were struggling in the South Bronx and in Brooklyn. So I figured, okay, well, my hip-hop should at least reflect what's going on in the world. So I started talking about the war, but also talking about why we have a big military budget and there's no educational programs, art programs to relate it to people in my community, because otherwise, who cares about there's a war going on if you don't know how it pertains to you. So that was my big shift. And Movement in Motion cultivated that. I started there with filmmakers, poets, MCs, and we just got out in the streets and started teaching and learning from each other, improv and street theater and whatever we could do.
Yeah, I want to get back to the N-word, because that's a real problem if you look at the hip-hop outside of US, especially like in our country, when the people lack the context and just like kind of don't reflect the conditions when it came from and how it is. They just see it on MTV and they kind of like take it as theirs and use it, although they don't have the the background, the historical background, the racial tensions in America. Have you seen this phenomenon when you're traveling? Did you have a problem with it? Or?
I haven't had a problem with it, because usually my music, I don't speak it, I don't say it. And even with the youth that I work with, and from Germany to like India and different places, if they have this in their language because of how I speak to them in the workshops, I think it's a vibration, an energy. They're not going to approach me like that. And then they'll ask me questions though, if I use the word or what I think about it, but they won't say it. And if they have it in their contents, with their raps, they usually censor. So I don't hear it personally, and I think it's just the way like I am. I don't tolerate it, but I don't say like don't ever use this. I just don't tolerate it. Even with youth that I work with in New York, where it's very comfortable. And I don't care if you're Black from the Bronx and you have the same experiences. If you're coming into the classroom, I don't want to hear that, so they know when they check themselves on their own. So.
It's very good. It's very good. And last question, how do you define freedom? What freedom means to you?
Oh, freedom is everything. Freedom, first and foremost, is liberation of self. I think it starts with self. If you can't free yourself, you're not free. Freedom is what we struggle for. Freedom is beautiful, but freedom is like another world that we see and envision. It's also proactive. It's not just reactive. Freedom has to be the colors that we see in the street, the way we treat each other, respect. Like freedom encompasses all these things, a way of life. So I feel like freedom is something that I strive to achieve each and every day, and I hope to reflect that in my music. And I hope people, when they hear the music, they feel free, like we did earlier today, where they should be able to sing as loud as possible, regardless of if they're off key or on key. That's freedom, you know.
Right.
They should be able to dance if they're on rhythm or off rhythm. That's freedom. So to me, it's everything. It starts with freedom.
And what are your plans for the future? Where do you see yourself heading to?
Ooh, well, good questions. You always have the good questions. You're like amazing. All right. I see what I really want to do. I started working at a program called One Mic. It's a hip-hop project that I talked about earlier with youth offenders. I would like to see them travel, and I would like to bring youth groups to different countries to know the experiences outside of their own, because I think that's one way of having a global consciousness, is to see that. And most people in my communities are deprived of the opportunity to travel. So if I can find a way to collaborate with people in Prague and Berlin and have this continuous connection, bring a few youth out to do some shows and to have conversations like we're having, I feel like that will be reflective in their work and their art, and they'll do different things with their voice, you know, when they're at home. So my goal right now is really focused on the youth. I wasn't even supposed to be out here this time around. It was so short, because I've committed to this process of working with them for at least a few years and not traveling internationally. But I think the more and more I want to implement international curricula and have all these youth groups connected from throughout the world and just have a dialogue, collaborate, make music together, study the beautiness of like languages, from Italian to like Czech to like, you know, German, and see how it's like wonderful to hear so many voices on one track. Like that's my, you know, dream. You know, and to have chapters of movement and motion like everywhere, you know, you know, so we could just keep it connected.
Global.
Yes, global.
Well, thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
We're definitely gonna be glad to have you back.
Yes, cool.
Peace.
Peace.
And freedom.
Peace and freedom, yes. Yes, that's right. It's important.